Okay, we are live. All right. Hi, everyone. It is Thursday, which means it is time for Celebrity Conversations with a Mighty Blaze. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jane Roper, and I will be the host of this conversation that is about to happen, which is going to be fantastic, between legendary Liza Alter, author of most recently Swan Song, and Diane Zinna, whose novel The All-Night Sun was released on July 14th. Welcome to both of you. We're so excited to have you both with us today on A Mighty Blaze.
Thank you so much.
Glad you are here.
Thank you.
Sure. So Diane is joining us from, oh shoot, I just forgot where you were joining us from.
Right outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia.
Okay, Northern Virginia. And Liza is here from Vermont, where it's probably a few degrees cooler than it is here in sultry Boston. So thank you to both of you for being here. I will do a brief intro for each of you. And after that, I'm going to let you guys just take it away and talk to each other. And for those of you who are watching, please feel free to add your comments. If you have questions, type them into the comment box there. And if we can get to it, we will pose them to the authors. In the meantime, sit back, enjoy. If you have a nice cold beverage, I have some nice, icy, really, really cold seltzer here that I'm enjoying, and I hope you will too. All right, so first, Liza Alter was born in Kingsport, Tennessee. She has published 12 books, 8 novels, a volume of short stories, 2 memoirs, and 1 narrative history. They have been translated into 18 other languages, and 4 were New York Times bestsellers, including the feminist coming-of-age classic Kinflix and Other Women. Doris Lessing once said of her work, "She had me laughing at 4 a.m." Her most recent novel, published in June, Swan Song, an Odyssey, was one of the millions most anticipated books of the month. The novel, set on a cruise ship, is about the doctor in charge of the ship's clinic, a woman in her mid-60s who is recovering from the loss of her longtime female lover, a much-admired writer, and coping with the high-wire madcapery of cruise ship life as she reckons with her past and feels her way into the future. Liza divides her time among homes in East Tennessee, Vermont, and New York City. And Diane Zinna is originally from Long Island, New York. She received her MFA from the University of Florida and went on to teach creative writing for 10 years. She was formerly the executive co-director at AWP, the Association of Writers and Writing Programs, which hosts the largest literary conference in North America each year, and it's fantastic. It's so much fun. In 2014, Diane created their writer-to-writer mentorship program, helping to match more than 600 writers over 12 seasons. She currently lives in Fairfax, Virginia with her husband and daughter. Diane's debut novel, released in July 14th, is The All-Night Sun, which has a gorgeous cover that I absolutely love. In the book, a lonely young woman gets too close to her charismatic female student, culminating in a dangerously debauched Midsummer Eve in Sweden. Publishers Weekly, in a starred review, says, Zinna's intimate debut dazzles with original language, emotional sentience, and Swedish folklore as it plumbs the depths of grief, loss, and friendship. Zinna reaches an inspired emotional depth that, as the title signifies, never stops blazing. The All-Night Sun was recently longlisted for the Center for Fiction's first novel prize. Congrats on that. That's awesome news. You are an excellent company on that too. So I will hand it over to Liza and Diane to take it away.
Before we get going, I wanted to thank A Mighty Blaze for hosting us. I think it's just a wonderful program to try to help writers whose tours have been canceled to launch their new books. So thank you very much, Jane, for having us. And I also wanted to congratulate Diane on such a powerful, beautiful book. What first drew me to it and made me want to interview you was that about 30 years ago, I was speaking at a book festival in Norway, and some of the writers that I didn't know took me out to these ledges overlooking a fjord and for Midsummer Eve. And so we built a bonfire and we had drank and ate and smoked cigarettes, and it was all very festive, but there was also something very kind of uncanny and sinister about it. And it was like we had to keep going as though we were dancing a tarantella and weren't allowed to stop until morning came, and even the birds seemed to me to be confused. And I thought I heard one of them saying, "Is it day? Is it day?" So I loved that your book was set on Midsummer Eve in the Swedish lake area, and I wanted to know more. So I was wondering, would you like to give us a little summary of your goals and your plot? And
Sure. So as Jane was mentioning, it's a story about a teacher, an adjunct professor who has long been grieving the deaths of her family alone. And into her classroom, into her life, walks this exuberant international student named Siri. And she's everything that Lauren wishes she could have been. You know, she's 18, Lauren is just about 30. And she sees in Siri all the things that she could have been if, you know, the situation with her parents passing away hadn't interrupted her adolescence in a sense. And so they form a really strong friendship. And when the girl invites her home to Sweden for the summer, she impulsively agrees to go. And she risks everything, including her job, which has been this lifeline for her. And when she gets there, she finds this place that is just sunlit. The sun's not setting, you know, she's just having to face everything that she dragged with her from the States. You know, it's all night long. And so it's a very personal story for me. You know, like you, Liza, I went to Sweden during midsummer and I saw, you know, the all night sun, and I felt it was uncanny. You know, it was beautiful, but at the same time, it felt otherworldly. And it was just a wonderful way to juxtapose a story of grief on top of that, you know, where you just can't escape these feelings that you've been harboring so long.
We experiencing technical difficulties? Liza, are you with us?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
here.
Okay.
Yeah. Diane, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Diane, I'm curious to know, did you, when did you travel to Sweden? What was that, what was the occasion of that?
Yeah, I was there twice. I was there in 2000, and similarly, I went with a friend. I was similarly experiencing a long period of grief, and this invitation to, you know, Sweden during the summer, it just felt like a respite from grief. And so I was eager to go. So I went there in 2000 and traveled around with a friend in a similar way to Lauren, in the all night sun. And I was glad to return there about 8 years later when that friend married a man that I helped introduce her to. So I went back, and that's when I had my manuscript under my arm, went to the wedding, but also revisited a lot of the places that were so central to the novel. And I could revisit them with the eye of trying to fill in certain details and think about how am I going to be able to relate this beautiful place to a reader.
Did you have any Swedish ancestry, or was this all new to you?
It was totally new to me, but interestingly, recently I did one of those ancestry.com things, and I came back with quite a bit of Swedish ancestry. So I was kind of proud of that. Yeah.
How bizarre. That's interesting. But one thing that I especially loved about the book was the way you used the Norse myths. There were a number of them sort of woven through the book, and it was absolutely beautiful. Like one was the brook horse that people, as many people as wanted, could get on it because the horse kept expanding. But once you got on it, you couldn't get off. And then it dove into the water and drowned the people on its back. So all through the book, the girls, the young women are enjoying horses and horseback riding. But there's this sinister aspect to it that you wonder what it's leading up to.
Yes, that's the story of Becca Huston. And it's not just people who jump on the horse's back, right? It's children. So even more sinister, right? They come to the side of a lake and they see a beautiful white gleaming horse and they can't resist it. And so they jump on the back and the horse dives underneath. And so that plus a very similar story of Necken, the monster that lurks in the water, playing a fiddle naked, luring young maidens to come and swim out to him. That was also woven through, and I think served really well for the story that I was trying to tell.
Yeah, that Necken character was fascinating, and you kept one thing about the characters was they were shapeshifters. You'd think you were getting to know a character, and then something would happen and flip your understanding of that character entirely. So I was thinking that the brother of Ciri, Magnus, was going to be Necken and was going to be a kind of evil character. And then it all flips around and he turns out to be a really sweet guy. And that happens with all the characters. You think you know them and then you realize there's another side to them.
Yes.
Many sides.
Yeah, in particular, I think with Ciri, the friend who invites Lauren to go back to Sweden. When I first wrote that character in my early drafts, she was an angel all the way through, and it really took my editor to say, this is such an introspective book. It's such a book about relationship and Lauren's growth. We have to have something about Ciri that's a little off so that it can help show Lauren, moving through her grief. And so I'm happy when I read the early parts of the book that Ciri still feels like this angel to me, the way that I first wrote her. But then after they arrive in Sweden and things start to take a dark turn, I'm discovering every time I read it through again, this new way of interpreting Ciri and getting to know all the different sides of her.
And Lauren also, the main character, the teacher character, you think she's kind of sad and depressed and passive and locked into her grief. But then when she gets to Sweden, she's a much more active character, and she's pursuing Ciri's brother, and in some ways she precipitates the tragedy of what happens to Ciri by favoring her brother over Ciri. So you think that all her passivity is who she is, and then she switches around and becomes the main actor.
Yes, yeah. And early in the book too, I think that her grief was very active. You might, the sense of her being very sad is definitely coming through, but I think about this one scene where she's just first moved into her apartment and all the walls are blank and white around her. And she feels her grief starting to close in this new space. And it's not until she hangs up this black dress that she wore to her parents' funeral in the closet. I always imagine that as an action of her feeding this place, feeding this new environment that she's in so that I will let her alone. And so sometimes when I read those early scenes, I see her being very active with her grief, even though the sadness is definitely on the page.
Well, so you were very much aware of the darkness of some of these myths. I kept thinking, I was surprised because I think of Sweden as this advanced liberal democracy with a wonderful social service network and wonderful people. But then I remember, well, they were also the land of the Vikings, very violent and aggressive people. And some of the myths reflect some of that ancestry of the current Swedish people. So you were aware of how dark some of these stories were.
Yes, one of my Swedish friend who I traveled with, she was the first person who told me about Necken. And that just took my literary brain on a ride. And I had to learn everything I could about this monstrous character and read all of the mythology and look at all of the paintings that he had been represented in over the years. And it led me to a lot of other stories that were similar to that. And I went back to her and I said, you didn't tell me about all this other stuff. And she's like, oh yeah, we grew up with those stories. It was just like, it was totally normal,
Well, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because another of their myths is that don't know the Swedish word, but the maypole that you dance around, and they do a frog dance around the maypole, and very silly in some ways, and in other ways, very deadly.
Yes, yeah. The Midsummer Song, right? And they dance this little frog dance around it. Everyone will do it, the adults, the children. It seems very beautiful, this way of getting back in touch with their innocent childhoods, dancing and singing Smogorodna around this maypole. But that maypole is supposed to be pointing all the way down to hell. Like, it's supposed to be pointing to the underworld. So when you think about that, it's just all these layers of really wonderful literary stuff.
Mm. Well, that's interesting because Native Americans, certain tribes danced around a pole, and the pole, the same. It went to it went to the underworld, then it represented the visible physical world, and then it pointed to the spiritual world. So it's a shamanistic tradition. I mean, ancient Scandinavia, I guess.
Did you, Diane, are there other books? I love when books interweave folk tales and myth and all of that. Are there other books that you looked to when you were writing it to see how this was done? And are there certain writers you admire who do that well?
Oh, thank you. I can say that I was mostly drawn to art. I was drawn to art about this. I was really looking at a lot of the paintings that had been done to represent this over the years. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, the movie Midsummer came out last year. Yeah. And, that was right when I was starting my edits. And, I think that introduced a lot of people to the ideas behind these Swedish traditions. Mm-hmm. And I was so worried. I was so worried that Ari Aster was going to own the idea of midsummer forever, and that people wouldn't be able to think about midsummer in Sweden without thinking about this horror story that he told. But I'm grateful that he shared it in a way so that people could, people are more familiar with it now, and so when they're coming to the All Night Sun, they have some understanding about what the traditions in Sweden were all about.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to think of literary uses of the Norse myths, and of course there's Wagner and opera, but Borges, the Argentinian writer, used some of the myths, and Tolkien did, I think, a bit. And then there's some science fiction, but on the whole, there's not a lot of literary fiction using those myths. So to me, there was a real freshness to it, and it made you look at the journey through the psyche in new ways. So I was really very impressed with it. And the landscape, the way you describe the landscapes are so beautiful, all the greenery and the water and the flowers and in such contrast to these kind of sinister myths. I thought you did a wonderful job.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really wanted to relay the beauty of that place, and I'm so grateful when people say that they really felt like they were there when they read the book. Sweden's on a lot of people's bucket lists right now.
Another of the myths that you used was actually a Catholic one that was probably trying to subsume some kind of pagan tradition, that Santa Lucia thing, where the woman at the winter, that was interesting. You were trying to play the dark off against the light. There's a summer solstice, but with this midsummer eve, and you think of the light as being a cheering thing, but actually terrible things happen on that night. And then the midwinter, the winter solstice, is a time of enlightenment, and Santa Lucia comes in with candles on her head, and the myth was about that she brought food to the Christians in the catacombs and then was martyred. But it's a time of enlightenment because it's when Siri learns that, when Lauren learns that Siri has died, and that Frida is actually a pretty nice person.
Yes. And that she becomes, I imagine, part of Lauren's life after this book, that moment of sharing, and after Sweden, she hears how Frida is struggling I feel like it's a moment where we really see that they're going to be in each other's lives after the end of this book. And I love the Santa Lucia story. There's a local church up here near me in Maryland. And every year for the past 12 years of writing this book, I've gone to their Swedish Santa Lucia service every Christmas time. And every year when I would see these women, these young women, drifting into the church down the front row, into the front row, wearing these long white robes, the girl in front with a crown of candles in her hair, all the other girls carrying a candle right underneath their face in this darkened church. I would just dream about the day of being able to share the magic of that with readers. And so every year I think, is this going to be the year that the book is going to be in the world and that this story, will be in people's minds.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is your debut novel. And what led up to that? Were there other novels, other stories, articles?
I haven't published much. I still haven't published much. It's really been this book for many years, 13 years. Previous to that, I did work on another novel that's quiet in a drawer, as many authors have one of those. And I did a collection of short stories when I was in my master's program. But this has been the thing that's really captivated me and held on to me and wouldn't let me let it go for so long. And there's a lot of stories that I feel like are right behind me waiting to be told. They've just been waiting for their turn. Now that this book is out into the world with readers.
That's great. And I'm sure if you worked on it for 13 or 14 years, you did many, many drafts. Did you have to do more when you got an editor?
Oh, yeah. I had a whole other section of the book, a whole other diversion, which was another love interest for Lauren back in the States, who was very different from Magnus. And so that was Charlie, and he was a good guy. And he talked to the kids outside her apartment. He brought her groceries and he saw her hurting. And it was so hard to cut him out, but it made for a tighter and stronger story. But I still feel him in the book. He is present in one scene, and he is the guy who pulls her back from the railing in the early part of the novel where she's thinking about jumping into off of this railing into this pit of students. And he's the one who pulls her back. And they had a whole story after that, but all of that kind of got tucked away in the drawer too.
That'll be leave them in. It's like an Easter egg,
Yes.
Leave in that little remnant there. That's
right.
That can be your sequel.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, one thing, I was drawn to the book because of the midsummer thing, but as I read the book, I was kind of amazed because in our own very different ways, we're dealing with the same themes, the light versus the dark, and coming to terms with grief. And in Swan Song, my main character's parents have died and her lover has died, and your main character's parents have died and her best friend dies. And, there were all kinds of interesting parallels to me, a lot of water involved and a triangle, between a man and two women.
Yes, and also the journal that she's been carrying around with her, right? Because Lauren also has this journal that has been a shared thing with Siri that features in at the end. But for your character, she's been carrying around her lover's journal, and she's thinking about throwing it off the ship at one point, right? Yeah. So when I saw that, I thought, oh my goodness, there's so many parallels between your book and mine. Happy parallels, yeah.
Well, and you both had the parallel experience of having to launch a book in the middle of a pandemic. So, hey,
we are bonded
in common.
Yes.
So I'm sorry you have that in common. However, I would be very curious, and I think we have some viewers who might be curious too, to know from both of you what that has been like. It probably is not exactly what you were thinking when you wrote these books, what you were expecting.
Well, for me, I've had the real benefit of being part of a closed Facebook group since the beginning of the year, before all of this started. the Debuts 2020 group. And we started out in January talking about what our book tours might look like and contract questions and just kind of comparing notes on our books and our experiences. But it has really developed into this incredible support network of people sharing how it's been in this changing world and sharing opportunities, coming together to create virtual events like this one. It's just made it a lot easier because I've been able to see so many people's journeys ahead of me. And then when my book came out and it wasn't maybe what I always dreamed of in terms of its reception, I could say, but there are so many other alternatives to doing this. Now everything is local because we're all online, and friends who would never have been able to come to a book event can come to one of these, right? So it's been a beautiful way of sharing, and I feel similarly that we're going to be very bonded, this group, in the years to come.
Yeah, that's very nice. Very nice attitude to have towards it. In my case, the book was scheduled to come out in early June, and there was a whole tour planned. And when the virus hit, that was all canceled. So some of the bookstores still wanted to do Zoom events, and we planned those. And then the Black Lives Matter thing hit, and so some of those had to be canceled. And so it's been, it's been good. It's taught me to stay light on my feet and, adapt and adjust. And like you, I've had wonderful help from writer friends. Adriana Trigiani interviewed me, and Lee Smith was on a Zoom with me, and my friend Madeline Cunin here in Vermont did a Zoom thing with me. So people have really been, and my editor did a Zoom thing. Everybody's been very cooperative and helpful in trying to make things work. But of course, with the bookstores shut, it's difficult because there's no browsing traffic. And but as you say, with Zoom, you can have so many more people from all over the world. It used to be you had to browbeat your friends and family when you came to a particular store, and now you can browbeat your friends and family all over the world. So it's a mixed bag for sure. And I just feel very happy and lucky to have my book out. And,
so Diane, what's next for you? Do you have another project in the works right now?
I do. I've been working on something for about 5 years, on and off, and it's set in Korea. It's set in Korea. It's a story of Korean families who have been separated because of the Korean War and the politically charged reunifications that happened over the years. And, I'm so close to being done with it, and so many people have trusted me with their stories as I have put it together that I'm going to finish. But it's really been hard for me because I've been very aware of the movement toward own stories and people being able to tell their own stories. And it may not be something that I pursue publishing for, but it's something that I know I need to finish. But I'm very sensitive to what's happened around American dirt, and just want to make sure that I handle that appropriately.
That's a difficult thing for writers because I see the point of cultural appropriation and that it's something that we ought to avoid. On the other hand, I think if I have to spend the rest of my career writing about elderly, white, gay women, I think I'll scream, Part of the fun of fiction is to be able to try to imagine your way into other lives.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
Seems like the key is trying to make sure that you're doing it with the ultimate responsibility and knowledge and doing all the homework that comes with when you, it sounds like you are, Diane, when you write about someone outside your own culture, you have to get it right. You have to really work hard to make sure you're getting it right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I had a question, Diane. What are the green balls in your novel? Does everybody ask you that?
I have not had that question yet, and I'm glad you asked. So right in the beginning of the book, there's a scene where Lauren is alone in her DC area apartment, and she looks out into the courtyard outside her apartment complex, and she sees these green balls kind of bouncing from like the grass all the way up to the top of the apartment complex and then back down again. And she's doubting what she's seeing, and she's wondering, is it, you know, like a spotlight? Is someone, you know, flashing a flashlight? You know, and just when she thinks that she's just going to chalk it up to something like that, one of these things kind of bursts against the glass of her window, and she can feel that it was watery, and she feels that it was, you know, childlike and happy, and she's just overcome with feeling. And so this was supposed to be reminiscent of the green lights that she sees at the end of the book with the Northern Lights. And so I'm not sure what these were in the beginning. I'm not sure what she was telling herself they were. I'm not sure what they really were, but they were there to kind of give closure to the book and to bring it to another moment of joy.
Well, yeah, I think it worked on that level. Yeah, absolutely. So we don't have to know what they were.
Well, you know, I had that same experience. I looked out, there was something that I experienced a long time ago, and I said, I'm going to put it in this book because it was something that gave me joy, and it was one of those unknowable moments. And it just was so fresh and bright in my mind. And it did remind me of the Northern Lights to some extent. So it felt like it did.
It's funny how sometimes in fiction we find ourselves putting something into a book and we have no idea why we're putting it in there, and you know, whether or not it works, you sometimes don't know until much later, and then you have to get someone else's impression, because you could easily be told, what the heck is going on with those green balls? Those don't mean anything. But it sounds like if they have a sort of a resonance that maybe you didn't even realize when you initially put them in, and then later you saw, oh wait, this is maybe why I was doing that.
You know, that was the reason why she opened up to Siri. You may remember that after she had that experience, she just had to tell somebody about what she saw because she didn't know what it was. And so she went and she explained that to Siri, and then everything else about her past comes rolling out of her. And so it was also a moment of just starting that relationship off.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting how irrational a lot of the writing process is. You know, like at the end of Swan Song, I started writing about the 100 Years' War in England, where half the population died of the Black Plague. And I thought, why am I writing this? And so then when coronavirus set in, I thought, oh my God, you know.
So it's your fault. You did it.
So I think I brought it on. Yeah.
You put it into the universe. Yeah, that's when I think back, it is kind of amazing the things we find ourselves bringing in to fiction. And this is why I remember being a kid in English class thinking, why are you asking me to ask, you know, tell what this symbol means? I'm not sure the writer really knew what this symbol meant. It works. But
sometimes it's just a feeling, and sometimes that feeling is what you need to drive yourself forward, right? Yeah,
absolutely. So I think we will probably wrap things up fairly soon. Liza, did you have other questions that you wanted to ask Diane? I know I've been sort of barging in here probably more than I should. So if you have other thoughts, other questions.
Well, I did wonder about the ending with Siri. You know, she was wearing a big crown of flowers, and I know those crowns often have a lot of herbs in them, and they're supposed to scare off evil spirits and stuff. And she almost seemed to me like some kind of a sacrificial figure, as though she had to die in order for Lauren to recover from her grief and get on with her life and have a new family to be part of. Do you see her as a sort of a sacrifice, or not necessarily?
Oh, I never thought about her that way. And I hope not. I feel like Siri was on her own course. You know, she was not taking care of herself. She was getting herself into situations. And Lauren had a habit of blaming herself, taking things upon herself in a way that shut her down. And this was one moment where she was able to see past it and to see the family in Sari's family that she could have, and that she wasn't alone. But I never saw her as a sacrifice. And I hope that Sari wouldn't want to be seen that way either. She's just too exuberant. Yeah. But you mentioned A Midsummer Crown, and I've got one of those right here.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Wear it.
Yes, there we go.
Oh.
Did you make it?
I didn't. I found it on Etsy, of course. Yeah.
Of course. That's fantastic. See, now I'm imagining the book launch party you would have had.
Wow.
Flowers and everything. If we should have brought some flowers and candles.
When the paperback comes out, we'll all be wearing these.
Maybe with our masks, but who knows?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Excellent. All right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to both of you. Thank you so much, Diane. It's really exciting to hear about your book, and wish you all the best with it. And Liza, best of luck with your book too. I hope it does fabulously. And I hope, in spite of the crazy circumstances, you're both able to connect with plenty of readers. I hope some of you who are watching today will go out and get both of these ladies' books. Oh, and I got to put in a plug for your bookstores, right? Okay, yes. So if you want Diane's book, a signed copy, you can get that at Tombolo Books. And I assume you can go there online, Tombolo in St. Petersburg, Florida, or if you live in the St. Petersburg metro area, you can walk in there probably. Just wear your mask. So yes, Tombolo Books, shout out there. And for Liza's book, her latest, Swan Song, lovely. I love that color. Oh, that cover matches your shirt too. It's perfect. It's like a nautical thing going on. You can find Liza's book at Malaprops in Asheville, North Carolina, at Union Ave Books in Knoxville, Tennessee, or at Northshire Books in Manchester, Vermont. So you have your pick of 3 states, or of course you can always go on bookshop.org, our partner, and find those books there. And those benefits, some of those proceeds will go to independent bookstores who we all want to keep afloat during this time. So thank you, everyone, and best of luck out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Liza.
All right.
Bye, Diane.
So long.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Sure. Wait, hold on. Are we still recording? Wait a second. I can't tell. I don't think we are. Nope.